Hello, I'm Ruby. I'm just finished school and I'm already married and pregnant. Here's how it happened. Everything started a few years ago, just before I became a teenager. I came home from school one day and ran into some police officers who were leaving our apartment. My mom looked pale, and it was obvious that she had just stopped crying. It turned out that my dad had been hit by a bus, and we had lost him. What's there to say now? Of course, it was difficult to overcome this, for both my mom and I. We even started sleeping in the same bed after it happened, because most of the time I would have bad dreams about losing my dad over and over again, and my mom said she would never be able to sleep in their bedroom without him. Almost every night, I would hear her crying in the bathroom. I wanted to help her, to cheer her up, but I didn't know how to. It took us about a month, or maybe a little more, to start to live our normal lives again. But then I began to notice that something wrong was going on with my mom. She began drinking literally every day. At first, she said that she was doing it to be able to get better sleep, and I believed her. But one day, I found her sleeping nicely during the middle of the day, which actually meant that she was skipping work. The exact same situation repeated itself a couple more times, to the point that she'd gotten herself fired from 2 different jobs over the next 5 or 6 weeks. Each time she said she was so sorry and even tried to give up alcohol. But without it, she would start to act really aggressively and, unfriendly. This happened enough that at some point, our neighbors began to suspect something and called social services. I spent 111 days at the child care center waiting for my mom's rehabilitation. When she finally came to take me back home, she looked thinner, but overall healthy. I will never forget the emotions I had when I saw her through the window. I thought that my happiness was ready to spill out and influence everybody around me. I saw that she was enormously proud of herself for having quit her bad habit, and so was I. Together, we agreed that it was going to be hard to live in that apartment and beside those same neighbors again. So we packed up our stuff and moved to another city, to a totally different environment. It was a tiny town with those streets that have small houses. I remember how I was amazed by the view while my mom was driving us to our new home. I knew that our life there was going to be different, better, and I wasn't wrong, by the way. At least to some extent. Now, Mom had to work hard to provide a living for us, since the house we'd settled in, even though it was a relatively small one, was still a little more expensive than our old apartment. It didn't have a fancy white fence around it, like they did on the neighboring street, and there was practically no land, so we couldn't have a garden or anything around it. But I was really fond of our home, and I loved it from the very first time I saw it. We shared a fence with our nice neighbors, the Gonzalez family, and they sometimes looked after me when my mom had to stay late at work. They had 5 children, but only one of them, Enrico, was my age, and pretty soon we became friends. And Mr. Gonzalez reminded me of my dad a lot, with his mustache and bright eyes. Then, when I turned 13, I guess, my mom said that she had fallen in love. I began staying overnight at the Gonzalez's from time to time, and Mrs. Gonzalez kept saying that my mom had a right to have her private life, so I shouldn't be angry at her. It wasn't my mom who I was angry at, by the way. That boyfriend of hers, Bob, was awful. He wasn't tall or handsome. Actually, he reminded me a lot of a basset hound. I kept wondering why my pretty mom had even given him a second thought. I begged God to somehow get them to separate, but it might have been a bad prayer since soon afterward they got married and he moved in. While my mom seemed to be happy, my life turned into a nightmare. I'll give you some examples and you'll see. First of all, Bob didn't like any noise, so anytime he was at home, I was supposed to sit silently in my room or just leave the house. And he definitely thought that I was no longer a child and forced me to do the housework and to sort of serve him. I'll never forget the first time he demanded a sandwich. He asked my mom to bring it, apparently not knowing that she had already left for the grocery store. And when I told him that she wasn't there, he told me to bring him his lunch. I got lost and did it, but later I told my mom about everything. She said that it wasn't a big deal for me to feed my stepfather, and I would have probably agreed with her if this didn't keep happening again and again. You know, I love my mom, and I always thought that she deserved to be happy. But this time, I strongly doubted that this jerk Bob was her Prince Charming. I tried to talk to my mom about this, but she was sure she was in love. And then, after some time had passed, she told me that she was pregnant. I was excited about this news because I had always looked at my friend Enrico and his big friendly family, and I thought that I would like to have something like that in the future. But Bob was far from being the happy father-to-be. Day by day, he was getting more and more irritated and gloomy. From time to time, he would come home late and drunk, but more frequently, he was out of the house. I saw that my mom was upset by his behavior, and they fought a lot, whether it was over supper being cold or about a pair of pants that he couldn't find. From time to time, I noticed bruises on my mom's body, but she told me she was just a little bit clumsy. I still don't know why Mom decided to have the baby if Bob was against it. Nevertheless, she continued working, and I kept helping her with the household chores because the bigger the baby bump got, the harder it was for her to move, bend, and do other stuff like that. Sometimes Mom didn't feel very good, so I had to skip school and replace her at her work at the store so that she wouldn't lose her job. There was a guy at Mom's work, Cal. Yeah, he was actually my first love and the guy who would completely twist my destiny. But you have to wait till the end to find out what happened. Anyway, he knew that I was just covering for Stacy. We decided to not say that I was my mom's daughter. And this was the only truth I was ready to tell him about my life. I lied about my parents. When we were talking about our families, I would talk about the Gonzaleses as if they were my real family. I just faked everything. My siblings, my parents, and my life. I saw how amazed Cal was while listening to my stories about family evenings and stuff, so I just kept lying. With time, we began seeing each other almost every day because it had become really hard for my mom to work in her condition. And very soon, I understood that he also liked me. I mean, a lot. One day, I came home and Mom and Bob were arguing loudly upstairs. I tried to close the door as quietly as I could and sneak into my room. But suddenly, I heard a wham sound, and after a few seconds, my mom fell down the stairs. Bob rushed to her while shouting at me to call 911. My hands were shaking, and for one single minute, I imagined that my mom was gone, and the fear that gripped my heart. As the doctor said, the fact that my mom fell down the stairs was fatal for the fetus. I won't even begin to tell you how devastating this information was for my mom. But you know what was interesting and a little bit scary? My mom didn't tell the police that Bob might have caused her to fall down the stairs. Neither did I, because I didn't actually see him do it. This was just my suspicion. I decided to talk to my mom and sort of tried to hint around that he might have done everything on purpose, but she didn't want to listen. She was like, "Oh no, you silly girl. It was an accident that I fell." She also said that every person has a different way of overcoming grief, but I seriously doubted that Bob was even sad about anything. In fact, his mood had gotten remarkably better, and I just couldn't stop assuming that it was because there wouldn't be any baby at home anymore. But since then, I began to sort of stay away from Bob, or at least tried to avoid being face to face with him. Mom had gone back to work, and even though it was tough for me, I had to break up with Cal. I was still afraid that he would figure out the truth, so I made up a story that my nice family and I were going to stay for a while in Europe, and that we wouldn't be able to see each other anyway. But a month later, I found out that I was pregnant. I rushed to talk to Cal, but he didn't believe me. He suggested that it wasn't his, saying that I might have gotten pregnant on my European trip and now just wanted to hold him accountable. I was devastated and totally lost, and I had nothing left to do but to tell my mom about everything. I think it would have been better if that news pissed her off or something, but she, on the contrary, just silently walked out of my room. Later that day, I found her drunk and sleeping on the couch. She had hit the bottle once again. Of course, Bob knew about my mom's addiction, and he got really pissed off when he came home later that day and saw everything. Believe me, I had no intentions of making our life any worse than it already was, but everything was my fault. At least, Bob said that when I told him about me being pregnant. He got so mad that I seriously thought he was going to find a way to get rid of the baby again. What if he accidentally also pushed me down the stairs? And then he screamed that if I decided to give birth to the baby, that he was going to give him or her up for adoption. I got scared and ran away to the Gonzaleses. I was crying hard and my whole body was shaking. I don't know what I would have done if Mrs. Gonzalez didn't hug me and try to calm me down. I could barely sleep that night, trying to figure out what I should do next. But in the morning, another surprise was waiting for me. We were all having breakfast together when Enrico suddenly decided to ask me to marry him. Mr. and Mrs. Gonzalez got completely silent, although they seemed to not be as surprised as I was. Enrico said that he had already set up a perfect plan for both of us. In 2 months, I was going to be 18 years old, and we'd be able to get married without our parents' permission, especially taking into account that I was already pregnant. It was the only way for me to escape from Bob's rights over me and my baby. He said that he would take this risk, at least for a while, until I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. There are no words to describe how grateful I am to this family. They saved me. We got married and moved into Enrico's granny's house to be far enough away from Bob. None of my family was at our wedding, and so far, none of them have called. And as far as I understand, their life hasn't changed much since I left. What do you think, guys? Is there any chance that after the birth of my baby, my mom will come and see me? Because I really miss her, despite everything.
Hey, I'm Alan. You know what's cooler than having a lot of money? Knowing how to make more. And I do. But yeah, you must think I'm full of myself. So let me share my story. I'm 17 now, but this all happened when I was 12. So my family is very poor. So poor that I wore the same shoes for an entire year, no matter whether it was raining or snowing. But those were good shoes. I mean, very durable ones. Like, they were the Iron Man of shoes. Nothing could destroy them. They were much better than my brother's, which made his feet hurt sometimes. But still, mine were very ugly, and I really wanted other shoes. I dreamed of having these sneakers I saw in a store. You may think that was shallow, but come on, I was 12, and there was nothing I could do about my wish to buy those shoes. I didn't have any money, so maybe I gave up on the idea. Nah, not really. I started to think that if I could just find a way of somehow making money, I could buy those shoes. And they weren't cheap. My dad was always saying that I should study better than him, so I could have a better life. And me and my younger brother really took his advice to heart. I was a really good student, because I spent so much time studying. I had good grades and no money, and some of my classmates had bad grades and a lot of money. So I made them an offer. I would do their homework in exchange for money. Not a lot of money, but enough to save up and buy sneakers after a couple of months. It was pretty easy for me, because I basically had to do my homework and then copy it for them, changing it a little so nobody would know it was a copy. I even had different prices for A's, B's, and other grades. And I also helped older kids a little with some subjects, not like math, but literature and history. It was going great at first, but then almost everybody stopped paying. I was wondering why, and it turned out that they made one guy pay and then copied his homework. I had to fix this. So I told them that if they were going to do what they did, I was going to raise the price. They didn't like that, but they also didn't want to do their own homework. So they agreed, and everything went back to normal. But then one of the guys wasn't happy about it, and he actually told everything to the teacher. Can you believe that? The teacher was very angry at me and said that I should stop doing that or else me and the other guys would have a lot of problems. So I had to stop. But I still hadn't saved up enough for me to buy the sneakers I wanted. So of course, I came up with another plan. Because now, many of the older kids knew me, and their teachers didn't know about my tricks. I asked them to give me cool stuff in exchange for their homework. You know, like toys, action figures, simple gadgets. I would then start playing with them in my class, making it look like I was having a lot of fun. To be fair, it was fun, and if someone asked me to play with them, I would say no, which made them want it more and more. Then, at some point, I would rent it to them, or even sell it. Soon, I was buying stuff from the older kids and selling it for more money, instead of doing their homework, because I was getting tired doing so much homework. But of course, sooner or later the parents started to notice, and the teacher was angry with me again, saying that I was abusing the other children, and it wasn't okay. I disagreed, because they were very happy with all of it, and I never, forced them to buy anything. Everyone was happy. But basically, I finally had enough money to buy the sneakers I had dreamed of for so long. So I bought them and went home. Finally, all my hard work was paying off, and even if I got into a lot of trouble, I still got what I wanted. Then, I saw my brother's shoes. They were in a way worse state than mine, and I remembered how many times he would say to me how much his feet hurt, and he was constantly sick because his shoes had a lot of holes in them and got wet every time he stepped into a puddle. So, I gave those shoes to my brother, and he was so happy and surprised. Honestly, it was much better to see my brother happy than to have them for myself. My parents were angry at me because they thought I stole them, but I explained how I got them. And then they were proud of me because I did all of it for my brother. I didn't tell them that it was for me at first, though. During that time, I learned that making money is all about giving people what they want, even if they think they don't. And in the end, I didn't regret giving away the sneakers for one simple reason. I enjoyed coming up with the ways to make money, and the process itself was very interesting to me. Now I'm 17, and me, my friends, and my brother are thinking about what kind of business we could do together. It's all very exciting. But it's not about the money. It's about being passionate and solving problems, about doing what you really love. Share